Once upon a time is the tagline of the fantasy spoof Kill the Farm Boy by Delilah S. Dawson and Kevin Hearne, which is the book I will be reviewing for you right this very moment, here on Reading Amok. Kim here, welcome to me and my books. I just finished Kill the Farm Boy by Delilah S. Dawson and Kevin Hearne, and we're going to talk about it today. I'm going to headline this review with Kill the Farm Boy isn't for everyone, but it is for me. Also, I love that dumb goat. If you're enjoying this podcast, you can now join the Reading Amok Book Club. The producer and host of this show, me, has a Patreon, and supporters get access to the Reading Amok Book Club. Help me decide what book is next and read along with me, all while supporting this podcast. Pledges start at only $1 a month, and you can give what you want. So use the link in the show notes if you like this podcast enough to support it on Patreon. Join the Reading Amok Book Club. It's not the worst thing on the internet. It's actually a little bit cool. So check out the Reading Amok Book Club today. Kill the Farm Boy is a fantasy sort of spoof novel with puns and jokes poking fun at like almost every fantasy trope under the sun. We follow a chosen one who isn't at all what you'd expect. There's a quest, there's magic, there's a talking goat. Like, that's just like the best way to sum up this book because I don't want to really like synopsis it that much for you because I feel like it'll kill the experience. I've got a whole podcast episode on reading blind, so you probably know that I don't like to give away too much. And especially with this book, I think that the fun of this book was discovery. The fun was in the discovery of what they were going to do with this. Yeah, so let me give you all my thoughts and feelings on it. I want to start by saying that I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It's the kind of work I can definitely get behind. The pointing out of what's wrong with popular fantasy, but not in an overly angry way, in more of a look how ridiculous this is kind of way, and that totally worked for me. And you know, while I kind of understand how a lot of readers, maybe not a lot, but some readers found the book too long without any quote-unquote real plot, I found the writing funny enough and clever enough to keep me going. It was just the right amount of like wiener humor for me, so it worked. I can also say that if this were a movie, I would have liked it, not loved it. Having this ridiculousness and crudish humor was super fun to have in a book, but I find it tiring and slightly lazy in a movie, if that makes sense. So, all right, let's start with talking about the writing and the style of this book. I found it smart. I found it very thought out. You could tell that a lot of care went into the tropes explored and exploited, maybe. Is that the right word I want to? Not quite sure if that's the word I want to use, but I felt like the authors, both Delilah S. Dawson and Kevin Hearne, really worked hard to point out the things that are wrong in the fantasy books we love so much, which I loved. That also led me to finding the book very thought-provoking, because there were a few things that would come up that I think, oh yeah, that is something that comes up in fantasy, and it is kind of dumb. So, like I enjoyed that it kind of did that for me. I really liked how it pointed out the things that are problematic without bullying. And that's subjective, I'll fully admit. Disclaimer. These are opinions. Okay, it's my opinion that this book didn't bully classic / popular fantasy. Like, I felt like it pointed out what was wrong in a making fun of it way without a mean spirit. That it wasn't mean-spirited, make you feel bad about yourself. It was pointing out that maybe you should think harder when writing quote-unquote classic fantasy, if that makes sense. I will point out, though, that I was confused at times, whether they were making writing decisions or if they were making a point. For example, sort of convenient, like if something convenient happened, I'd sort of have to pause and think, did they mean for this to just conveniently move the story, or was that done on purpose for a reason? So that happened more than once in this book, and I really am holding out the hope that it was kind of made to point out that convenient things happen. And I don't want to spoil it all, so I won't give any super specific examples, but there were times in the book when I was reading and I was like, that's kind of not my favorite way to write that, and I'm not sure if you did it that way on purpose or if that's how you write. This is my first book by both of these authors. I haven't read anything else by Kevin Hearne nor Delilah S. Dawson, although I am an avid and loyal follower of Delilah S. Dawson on Twitter. She's amazing for readers and writers. Dudes, yeah, check out her Twitter. Kevin Hearne, I need to check out on Twitter because I'm going to assume, since he's hanging out with Delilah S. Dawson, that he's probably equally cool. So I need to get on that. Anyway, yeah, so I haven't read anything else by either of these authors, and so I don't know if that is one of their styles, that's just the way things happen, or if those were conscious decisions made because that's how decisions are made and plots move in classic / popular fantasy books. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of confusing when you don't want to give a spoiler, but that's the very best that I can do. I want to talk about the characters because they were my favorite part. They're often my favorite part of books. I am a character-driven reader. Yeah, so I just have to gush about some of these characters for a second, and we're going to start with Gustav the goat because he was perfect. Like, I loved him so much. I loved everything about that stupid goat. He would just come in with these perfect responses to things. Like he would insert himself into conversations like this sort of peanut gallery that were so like and the comments were just so dead on and perfect and hilarious and honest and yet still goat like. If that makes sense. Like it just was, he was such a delight in this book, like kind of giving this commentary of, yeah, that's actually a really good point, or oh my gosh, you're a goat. Like it's just so like, I loved it. I loved everything about that goat. I could read a whole story about that goat, which I kind of did with this book because that's kind of, there's a lot of the goat in this book. And I loved everything that happened with that goat. I can't gush about this goat enough. So I'll do my best to stop myself now, but there was also some really great LGBTQ representation, and it was freaking adorable. The LGBT romance in this book was, oh my gosh, it was so delightful. It was so delightful. It was adorable. It was just adorable. I found it, I can't come up with a better word than adorable. It was just heartwarming and lovely. And I was definitely rooting for it, and I'm sorry I loved it so much. I'm not sorry. I'm not apologizing. I loved it. Okay. I withdraw my apology. Loved it. I also found that the points of view were done very well. With each character, the perspective changes chapter by chapter, so you get kind of, it's still in third person, but each chapter is from a different character's point of view. And I felt like that was done really well. That can be tricky. It was one of the reasons I took so long to get into A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones, was because in the books, it's just like every chapter was a different character, and so you kind of had to get into a different person's head, and the transition didn't happen very fast for me, so like it would take me a couple of pages in the chapter to get into it, and by the time I was completely solidified with that character, we'd get a new character POV, and it was like, okay, we start all over again. And so it took me a while to be able to switch quickly when reading Game of Game of Thrones slash A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. But I feel like here in Kill the Farm Boy, which is probably part of why they did that, was because that happens in fantasy, especially like big epic fantasies and high fantasies, I feel like. But in Kill the Farm Boy, the way each character had a voice was very simple and very clear and very easy to get into. They weren't so different from each other that it was a huge style shift. It was just different little kind of, what's the word, idiosyncrasies, I guess, like character-isms that happened that would let you know who's speaking. I mean, obviously they tell you, which character gets the first sentence of the chapter, lets you know whose head you're in. But it worked for me, and it doesn't always work for me. So I really appreciated that. I thought that, like I said, it was clear, and they each had their own voice and not just that they each had their own voice, but they each had their own voice in a way that I liked. So it was, certain little ways that they think or ways that they speak or mannerisms and things that I found clever and unique and well-rounded characters. So it worked for me. It worked for me that the points of view were not only clear and what's the word? They were clear and easy to decipher between, but they were also nice characters, like good characters, each in their own right. And so when you had I wasn't disappointed that we were switching from one character to another, because I kind of liked what was going on with each one. And so I was like, okay, cool, we're gonna try this guy now. Oh, we're gonna try this girl now. And it worked for me, and I really liked it. I do have to say that the story itself was a little lacking in actual story. The actual plot was a little lacking in just like meat to the story, but I'm not convinced that that's not the point. And this is kind of goes back to what I was saying about the writing and style, about how like sometimes I was confused if something just happened that I didn't like the style in which that happened, or if that's them doing that on purpose to call out something or to make a point or to highlight something that doesn't work. And so I am not 100% convinced that they didn't do that on purpose, that they left it kind of a, for lack of a better term, surface level story, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like it could have had a lot more meat to it, but it could have been a purposefully vegetarian story, if you will. Like, I guess that's the best way to describe it. Like it wasn't a very deep story. It wasn't a very intricate or profound plot. And that may have been a decision that they made. And if it was, bravo, I get it. If it wasn't, then that's kind of a shame, because the book could have been significantly shorter if that wasn't what they were going for when they wrote this kind of spoof story. It was paced very well, while it didn't have that sort of like really sink your teeth into it plot. I don't feel like it dragged that much. I think some readers might feel like it's a little draggy. It kind of just keeps going when you're like, okay, there's no like real story here. We're just still going with this book. It very easily could have been a novella, but I liked the characters enough, and it was funny in the way that I like things to be funny, that I didn't mind the length of it, and I didn't feel like anything was given more attention or more time than it needed. So there's that. I feel like it was paced well. Others may disagree, so I'll kind of just leave that there for you to chew on, I guess. I did love how they ended the book. I loved it. Obviously, I will not say anything about how they ended it, but I liked the closure / way that we could go right into the next book. It is a series. I believe the second book will be coming out next year. I want to say next spring, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check it. But yeah, I thought they ended it in a way that didn't make me go like rip your heart right out cliffhanger, but it was ended nicely. It was ended nicely, and I am seriously considering picking up the second book when it's out. I liked it enough and found it clever enough that I would consider buying the second book, which is a big deal. I usually read the first book in a series and don't move on. A book really has to get me to make me want to move on, and this made me consider moving on, so that's great. Just to wrap things up, with my own general thoughts and feeling, The Goat was perfect. I found it funny. It was my kind of humor for written books, not so much for movies. You know what the humor really reminded me of was very Mel Brooks. I know a lot of people kind of compare it to Spaceballs, like it's the Spaceballs sort of their answer, the way Spaceballs is the answer to Star Wars. This is the answer to fantasy novels and the things that they do that are cringy. I would compare it a lot more to Robin Hood Men in Tights than I would Spaceballs, for obvious reasons, forests and adventure type stuff, not so much space opera, but not at all space. This is not at all space anything. There's nothing space in this book. It is all fantasy. But Mel Brooks movies are okay for me. So it's kind of funny that a book that is so like a Mel Brooks movie totally worked for me in humor when a actual Mel Brooks movie only sort of works here and there for me. There are certain things that work for me in a movie form, but in book form, I loved it. So take that for what you will. I'm not really sure if that's telling you anything about me or about this book, but it's where we're at. This is it. This is where we're at with it. So, if you insist upon a 5-star rating, I would give this book 5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. I can fully understand why it's not for everyone and why some people didn't love it. But if you are a fan of Mel Brooks and that sort of humor and the poking fun at things that maybe should be thought about, then it's definitely the book for you. If you need a light, well, I don't want to say it's a light read because it does point out problematic things, but if you need something that's not gonna make you feel terrible, if you need something that's just a good laugh and that's gonna leave you rolling your eyes, but in the way that you kind of roll your eyes and sigh like, yep, this is where we're at, as opposed to actually making you feel terrible, then this is the book for you. Like, it's not the kind of book that's going to point things out so much so that you are depressed when you close it. This book is going to leave you sort of laughing at a genre that you love in a way that doesn't make you hate it. I think that's the best way to do it. And it is full of puns. There's puns. Puns. It's very punny. Puns as far as the eye can see. Very on purpose. Very fun. A lot of play on words and puns and things that is just delightful. This book was delightful. This book was fun. This book didn't bully, I felt like, and it was a jolly good time. That's what I have to say about Kill the Farm Boy by Delilah S, Dawson and Kevin Hearne. Hey, if you think this podcast doesn't suck, go ahead and head over to iTunes and give it a positive review if you're not bored / have the time / are really enthusiastic about how much you love this podcast. iTunes likes to hear about that kind of stuff, and so do I. So you can go ahead and click the link in the show notes to take you over there and leave a review. And what else do I need? Oh, you can also get a copy of this book using the link in the show notes. It is an affiliate link, so I do get a small commission if you use it at no extra cost to you. In case you want to pick it up and read it and laugh with me, because I thought it was very funny. You can also find this podcast on social media. It's a good idea to keep track of that because I do post podcast topics there, and then I read your comments about it on the show. You can find Reading Amok on Instagram and Facebook at Reading Amok, and you can find me on Twitter at KimBarbu. Links for all that are in the show notes because, well, I'm lazy and I like things to be convenient, so they're there for you. That's going to do it for me and this episode of Reading Amok. Remember to read what you want, not what you should, and until next time, read freely.